Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what is making the headlines with the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Pippa, Crerar and Harry Cole, with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to both of you. Lots to discuss, of course, so let's take a look at the front pages. The Eye claims turmoil within the SNP has delayed the party's dream of an independent Scotland, as Humza Yousaf's was voted to be the party's new leader. The Express has a different take, leading on comments from Rishi Sunak, who has vowed to fight for the union as Mr Yousaf becomes the new leader of the SNP. Front page of the Financial Times is Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to delay judicial reforms after days of protests in Israel. The Guardian focusing on Doreen Lawrence's claims that the publishers of the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday hired private investigators to hack her phone. The Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, has blamed early retirements for increased interest rates and inflation. That is the front of the Daily Telegraph. The Metro says the Home Secretary is fighting rebels on both sides of her party over her plans on small boats arriving on the south coast of England. Daily Mail reports on the Prime Minister vowing to crack down on what they call nuisance staycation party houses. Only Fools and Horses star Sir David Jason reveals in the Daily Mirror he's met a daughter he did not know he had for 52 years. And we end with the Daily Star, which says experiments will be carried out in space to try to tackle Earth's nastiest diseases. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head straight to Pippa and to Harry, and straight to Pippa, the SNP, and what it means, everybody wants to know, for both independents and for UK politics.
Well, I mean, this is a result that we've all been looking forward to finding out. It wasn't clear, despite the fact that there was three candidates throughout the race, which of the last two ultimately, whether it be Humza Yousaf, the favourite, or whether it be Kate Forbes, who was the finance secretary, who was a social conservative and caused ripples early on. And then, of course, we found out that the continuity candidate, Humza Yousaf, who was Nicola Sturgeon's heir apparent, won by not a massive margin, didn't win on first preferences, but nevertheless, he is going to be confirmed on Wednesday as Scotland's First Minister. And the first act of Humza Yousaf's leadership of the SNP was to fire off a letter to Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, demanding a Section 30 order, which, if granted, would trigger the mechanism to allow a second Scottish independence referendum to go ahead. Now, you might be a bit surprised by that because, of course, the general feeling was that Nicola Sturgeon had run out of road in her attempts to get another independence referendum. She, of course, went to the Supreme Court. Then she had that row internally about whether they would use the next general election as a de facto referendum, decided against the plan eventually after some internal dissent within the SNP. So you might wonder why he's doing that now, when it's clear that Nicola Sturgeon has had that request. She did it 3 times. 2014, they got a referendum. 2017 and 2019, they didn't. And Downing Street made quite clear that this time would be no different, that a second referendum would not be granted. But Yousaf's allies said that he felt he had to do that just to show that he was willing to, he was prepared to, because, of course, ultimately his aim is still an independent Scotland, even if that seems further away now than it did when Nicola Sturgeon was still in power.
Yes, the Telegraph's take is that he will also resurrect Nicola Sturgeon's trans reforms, the self-identification laws, which got her into difficulties. But even on the front page of the Eye, Professor John Curtis, well-respected, says even yes voters may desert the SNP. Will he have to fight the next general election, Harry, on things like education and health, because he knows that's what Labour will do? And the whole point is that Sir Keir Starmer can turn around and said, yes, you can get independence, maybe, eventually, maybe. But right now, if you vote Labour, you can kick out the Tories, which we know lots of SNP voters would want to do. So this is fascinating, isn't it, about what this means for the Labour Party?
Yeah, I think, Yousaf is on quite shaky ground if he's going to solely fight on domestic issues. As Kate Forbes, his opponent, said, he was a useless transport secretary, he was a useless justice secretary, he's been a useless health secretary. What makes you think he's going to be any better as first minister? Now, you can expect to see that quote on every single Labour leaflet and every single Tory leaflet in the Scottish elections, in the general elections, in local council elections. The SNP have absolutely ripped each other to shreds in the last 5 weeks. They're a party that have been very, very good at discipline until the wheels came off when Sturgeon pulled the stumps just 5 weeks ago. So big uphill mountain for Hamza Yusuf to climb and taking over. A very, very narrow victory. Probably the victory that will keep the party together. If Kate Forbes had squeaked it with in a similar margin, I think the party would be in a fresh round of civil war. But I think they will be able to sort of try and pull it together. But all he's really left with is sending letters to Rishi Sunak saying, I demand a referendum. Well, that's not going to happen. That was ruled out within minutes. And tonight you've got both the Tories, I think, and Labour kind of cock a hoop that they got the candidate they wanted. They were quite scared of Nicola Sturgeon in a way. She was seen as a sort of behemoth of Scottish politics. They couldn't really land a glove on her. Whereas Yusuf, he's got his terrible track record as a minister, as well as being quite a prickly character to deal with along the way. His approval rating actually was higher going into this campaign than it was when he finished with it. So he's starting from a low bar. Tories tonight privately calling Hamza useless and various names, saying he's going to be an asset to the union. And you've got Labour going around saying they think that privately they can win 20 seats on the back of his victory. So it's quite the low bar that he's coming into.
Yes, and Labour's battle for SNP votes may make them go mute on the fight for the union, which, if we look at the Daily Express, Pippa, Rishi Sunak is all too willing to take up.
Yes, that's right. I was very struck by his press conference, a separate press conference. I'm sure we'll come on to it later, the antisocial behaviour stuff. This morning, he was asked about the union and Sunak, and his response was, well, when I was in Wales last week, which was a bit confusing. But his point was that he is a big supporter of the union across the board. And of course, it is known as the Conservative, or it is the Conservative and Unionist Party, and it's something which is dear to his heart, or so he tells us. I think his job has probably keeping the union together has got a bit easier. Of course, Boris Johnson was famously unpopular in Scotland and was greatest gift to the SNP when it came to Tory leaders. It's slightly different with Rishi Sunak, and as Harry says, Tories will potentially put on some more votes by not having Kate Forbes, who was socially conservative and risked probably taking some of their core vote. And also, as he says, Labour potentially stand to take 20, could take up to 20 seats, or at least 20 seats are in play, which could be the difference between the next election between squeaking home or having a sort of a decent majority. They don't need to fight, I think, on the union. They won't. That's not where they're planning to fight. I think they're focused more on giving on an alternative to the Tories in power and focusing on domestic issues and what Labour could offer Scotland on the domestic front. Although Starmer won't be able to avoid the issue of the union forever, and he has been quite clear after initially sort of a bit of prevarication and not necessarily, this is some time ago when he first took over, he's now has consistently said for some time that of course he would rule out any deal with the SNP before or after an election, and that his aim is keeping the union together. And it's interesting that one of the sort of main attack lines from the Tories in recent years under Sturgeon at elections has been a little picture, if you remember that election advert of Ed Miliband and Nicola. In fact, it was in Alex Salmond's pocket at one point, I think, Labour leaders in Alex Salmond's pocket, and then obviously it became in Nicola Sturgeon's pocket. Now, voters in England don't necessarily know who Hamza Yusuf is, so I think the potency of that attack will have gone with his arrival. But obviously the union still for Scots is a key issue, but increasingly I think people in Scotland are feeling they want to focus on things like the health system, on the schools, on transport, rather than necessarily the constitutional issues which have dominated in the years of Nicola Sturgeon's rule.
Yes, and in your article in The Sun, Harry, you point out that his victory, Humza Yousaf's victory, means that three of the biggest jobs in politics, that of Prime Minister, that of Mayor of London and the First Minister of Scotland, will all be held by British Asians in a historic first. All sorts of records broken today. Did I also read that he will be the first Muslim leader in Western Europe? I mean, it's amazing stuff, really.
Yeah, and all at the age of 37, which is incredibly impressive as well. So I think everyone, it was quite funny today. You saw this great moment where lots of people like Keir Starmer rushed to Twitter to say, "Wow, what a moment! Congratulations!" and then gave it about 8 seconds before then going, "But we disagree with you completely, and we're going to fight you to the very end." So, no, an important moment to mark, whatever your political persuasion, an incredible achievement for this country that lots of people like to talk down as a horrible, isolated, racist island, and what an awful place we are, and how isolated and terrible we are. But actually, look at our achievements as a country. We should all be very proud of that, regardless of our political persuasions.
Yes, the children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants, just at a time when immigration is being so hotly debated in this country. It is interesting, certainly. Let's move to The Guardian now. Your paper, Pippa, and Prince Harry in town, photograph of him there, for a case against the publisher of the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday.
Yes, there's a sort of a bit of a ripple of surprise this morning that Prince Harry turned up at the case. We all knew the case was happening today. And Elton John and Doreen Lawrence also turned up, maybe slightly more expected because, of course, they're mostly based in the UK. They're based in the UK. But this is a phone hacking case against allegations against the Daily Mail. What's really interesting is that the Mail largely escaped these allegations up until this point. It obviously previously led to the closure of the News of the World. But this is the first major challenge that could result in really quite profound reputational damage. And it relates to the time when Paul Dacre was in charge of the Daily Mail. The most striking, I think, allegation to come out, or testimony to come out, was from Doreen Lawrence, who, if you remember, back in the 90s when her son Stephen was killed, the Mail had sort of these campaigning front pages where it put on pictures of his killers and with the word murderers, and basically said to them, "Sue us if you dare." It was seen as being really sort of bold and campaigning. I think the background to it was that Neville Lawrence, Stephen's father, knew or was was Dacre's decorator, so had a personal relationship with him. But Doreen Lawrence claimed that the Mail hired private investigations, as we report on the front of The Guardian, to hack her phone and obtain information about her son, potentially disrupting the police investigation into his racially motivated killing. And she now says, in really quite moving testimony, that she thinks she failed him by trusting the Mail at that time, and suggested that the paper only campaigned for justice on his behalf, not because of the merits of the case, but basically in a cynical bid to sell more newspapers. So it was a pretty sort of extraordinary hearing, and that's before we got on to sort of some of the testimony from some of the other big names as actors like Liz Hurley and Sadie Frost, amongst them Liberal Democrat politician Simon Hughes. Phone hacking is something which has plagued the newspaper industry, as I say, for a long time now, for a couple of decades, and this is sort of the latest chapter in this history. So we'll all be, journalists and beyond, will all be watching closely to see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, indeed so. And it means, the appearance today means that the coronation of his father is sandwiched between court appearances by Prince Harry, because a case against Mirror Group newspapers is due to go to trial on the 9th of May. So, straight after the coronation. Anyway, lots more still to come. Inside the Sun. Oh, he's sort of on still. Anyway, inside the Hun, headlines: Yob's home axe, the Prime Minister's 3 strikes and you're out rule for tenants. Talking about that and plenty more when we come back. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole from The Guardian and The Sun. Welcome back to both of you. Harry, let's go to Yeah, it's your paper, The Sun, sorry. Yob's Home Acts, Rishi's 3 strikes and you're out rule for problem tenants. The Daily Mail's talking about a crackdown on nuisance Airbnb party houses. I'm intrigued by why Rishi Sunak's decided to tackle antisocial behaviour now.
Mainly because there's going to be an election in about 14 months' time, I suspect, and people are really angry about this stuff. It's sort of bubbled under the system, under the radar for a while. We got a lot of noise at the weekend and into the papers, into Monday's papers about banning hippie crack and laughing gas and stopping people, desecrating town centres by boozing and breaking up yobos and scrubbing graffiti and all the things we've heard before. Actually, if you drill down into the detail, which was actually published today, there's some quite sweeping changes that the Conservatives are proposing. Michael Gove, as ever, has done quite a good piece of work on the sort of white paper of the proposals. And there's some quite radical changes to tenancy laws proposed, including the ability for private landlords to kick people out in a matter of weeks if they are causing disruption, antisocial behaviour, partying, breaking tenancy agreements. That's a big move to allow landlords to kick people out. Also, on the social housing side of things, 3 strikes and you're out. This is a real problem that's been blighting lots of communities, and the fact that complaints are put into councils, problem tenants are told off time and again, but it's actually very hard to evict people. The government really want to strengthen the laws around that. It will require a change to the law to make it easier to evict people. And the other one that is as the Mail put it there, Airbnb, a sort of almost wild west of deregulation so far. Actually, part of the business model of Airbnb is complete lack of regulation around it. But some people we've spoken to in the paper tomorrow saying their lives have been ruined by the fact that they don't know who these landlords are. They buy these flats, they buy these houses, they buy even these cottages in small villages, and they rent them out to God knows who, and they have wild hot tub parties until 4 a.m. And tenants are going around the bend because they complain, but by the time anything's done about it, the next tenants have moved on. So in the detail of this clampdown, some really interesting things.
OK, I'm moving on only because the Metro is going with Jeremy Corbyn, the prospect of him being booted out of Labour, the prospect too of him standing as an independent. Our correspondent Liz Bates caught up with him today.
Can we just very quickly ask you if you're thinking of standing as an independent, Mr Corbyn?
Thank you very much. I'm going to the demonstration against the immigration bill, and I suggest you report that too.
We are reporting it.
Well, good.
It will take 10 seconds.
You can come and listen to what I have to say.
Can I just ask you for...
I look forward to seeing you over there. Thank you very much.
I just want to talk to you for 10 seconds about your future as a Labour MP.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, not too happy about that. Is this for political reasons, Pippa?
Well, we were expecting him to say, actually, that he was going to stand as an independent, but he's clearly not made his mind up yet. Now, this is something which the Labour's ruling NEC committee is going to talk about tomorrow. They're going to confirm that Corbyn won't be allowed to stand as a Labour candidate. Obviously, this is something that Keir Starmer talked about a month ago when the Equality and Human Rights Commission ruled on it. It sort of gave its final verdict on Labour clearing up anti-Semitism. But interestingly, the motion on which the committee are going to be, the NEC is going to be voting tomorrow, doesn't mention anti-Semitism. It basically says that were Corbyn to run as a Labour candidate, it would damage Labour's chances at the next election amongst key voters it needs to win. So they've obviously just concluded that actually amongst those possibly Red Walland and other parts of the country, Corbyn isn't very popular, better off without him. Clearly very controversial amongst some of the members because they think it should be up to the members of his local constituency to decide. So, I think the row will rumble on for a bit inside the Labour Party, but I think, Starmer is not going to meet much objection outside the Labour Party, and certainly amongst those voters who were put off by Corbyn at the last election.